Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I welcome you to the lecture 9. We are going through the chapter number 3, Nervous System and Behavior. We are already done with the peripheral nervous system. Actually, nervous system has two major divisions, the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. In the previous lecture, we have gone through the peripheral nervous system in detail. And in today's lecture, we are going to read about the central nervous system and its divisions, brain, and spinal cord. So, let's begin with brain. Structure and function of brain. Brain. What is brain? Human brain is actually a very delicate and a complicated machinery at the same time. It is enclosed in 8 bones called cranium. Okay? The brain conducts higher mental processes like thoughts, reasoning, perception, emotions, memory, and so on. So, brain is involved in higher mental processes. Whatever a person exhibits in his external behavior or what is going inside the body, what are the physiological responses, everything is being controlled by brain. And the peripheral nervous system assists the brain in doing so. Okay? The spinal cord carries the mental processes of secondary importance, but the brain carries out the higher functions. Weight of the brain. Human brain weighs weighs 46 ounce. Okay. Human brain weighs 46 ounce in males and 44 ounce in females. Experts believe that the organism will be intelligent in proportion to how much more the brain weighs, okay, than the spinal cord. So the brain in human weighs 50 times more than the spinal cord. So we can say that man is the crown of creation, and this proportion of brain is not found in any other living being, in any other animal. So human brain is a complex, a delicate, and a highly functioning machinery. Let's come to the structure of brain. Brain is divided into 3 major parts: forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Okay? In today's lecture, we are going to study in detail the forebrain. Okay? And its parts, its divisions. Forebrain. Forebrain is the most important part of nervous system, we can say, and it is the most developed part of brain. It forms 90% of the whole brain. Major parts of the forebrain include number 1, the cerebrum. Cerebrum, okay? This major part of the brain, of the forebrain, is cerebrum. The forebrain forms 90% of the whole brain, and the major portion is of cerebrum. The cerebrum extends from the forebrain up to the back of the head. Forebrain up to the back of the head. This part of forebrain, the cerebrum, is divided into 2 hemispheres, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. Both of these hemispheres are connected by corpus callosum. Both hemispheres control bodily acts of opposite side. The right hemisphere controls the right side and the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. These both hemispheres are autonomous in learning and memory. These both hemispheres are specialized for learning and memory processes. Left hemisphere plays important role in speech production. Okay? Both of the hemispheres have different functions. The left hemisphere is specialized for speech production and the right hemisphere has its role in mathematical calculations. Okay? What is corpus callosum? As I told you, corpus callosum interconnects both the hemispheres, right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. It transfers information between the both hemispheres and harmonizes the sensory and motor responses. It is because of this corpus callosum that the brain functions like an organized unit, like a unit. These two hemispheres are connected by corpus callosum, and this corpus callosum, because of this connection, the brain functions like a unit. Otherwise, the left and right hemisphere must be working separately, or we cannot comprehend that how would brain function in that way. So, this was about cerebrum, which forms the major portion of forebrain. The next part is cortex, cerebral cortex. Cortex is 3 millimeter thick layer which covers the both hemispheres. Cortex covers the both hemispheres. Cortex is actually made up of gray matter. The layers or the folds of the cortex contain all the sensory and motor nerves of the body. Okay? All the sensory and motor nerves of the body are located in this cortex. A man, as the man gains full knowledge or intelligence and experience, these layers or folds grow in number and size, number and convolutions. We can say that lower animals do not have these layers, whereas animals with relatively better intelligence have few layers of cortex. So, different experts say that humans owe their intelligence due to this cortex. The more the convolutions, the more the layers, the more the intelligent a person is. A cortex relatively less layered is considered to be a sign of low intelligence. Okay, we associate intelligence level with the convolutions and layers of cortex as well. So the layers of cortex are very much prominent. One layer is called fissure of Sylvius, which extends from frontal lobe to the occipital lobe, and it divides the cortex of one hemisphere into two parts. Another layer is the fissure of Rolando. It extends from the temporal lobe to the parietal lobe, and it divides cortex into two parts. So each hemisphere, we can say that each hemisphere is divided into four parts because of these fissure of Sylvius and fissure of Rolando. These parts are known as lobes. Okay, so let's discuss the divisions of hemispheres or lobes. There are four lobes: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe. Okay, frontal lobe. This part of brain constitutes the frontal lobe. It is located at the interior part of brain and extends up to the fissure of Rolando. We can say the frontal lobe contains motor area, part of motor cortex controls the movement of lower nerves, and the lower part of the motor cortex controls the movement of upper nerves of the body. Many large organs are being controlled by a small part, whereas many small organs are controlled by a large part of the lobe. For example, the nerves of hands and legs are controlled by a small area of frontal lobe, whereas the functioning of lips, eyes, nose, or forehead are controlled by the larger part. And it is because these organs have very complex structures. If any area of the frontal lobe develops a defect or gets damaged due to any injury, the relevant organ loses its functioning. Okay, so the next part is the parietal lobe. It is behind the frontal lobe. Okay, this is the frontal lobe. Now this is the parietal lobe. Parietal lobe is actually concerned or related with senses. The upper nerve of the cortex is in the parietal lobe are connected with the lower nerves, and the lower nerves of the cortex are connected with the upper nerves of the body. So the sensations of cold, heat, pain, touch, and so on are being controlled by this lobe. And if any part of sensory area is destroyed, individual will be unable to sense all these. Okay. Next is the temporal lobe. Temporal lobe is located above the temples and behind the frontal lobe. This lobe is concerned with hearing, smelling, and tasting. Okay. Equal number of nerves from both the ears extend into the temporal lobe. If some defects arises in the temporal lobe, the individual may be losing hearing, smelling, or tasting sensations. He will be unable to smell a fragrance, he will be unable to taste, unable to hear. So temporal lobe is involved in these three senses, and if the temporal lobe is damaged or injured or gets some defect, so these three will be affected. The fourth lobe is occipital lobe, and this lies above the occiput in the posterior part of brain. The occipital lobe contains visual area. It is affected by the sensations of light received by the sensory receptors in the retina of the eye. And if this area is damaged, so the vision of the individual gets paralyzed, gets defected, is affected. Okay, so these were the four lobes of the cortex area. Okay, functions of forebrain. This was the major structure of forebrain. Forebrain consists of cerebrum and cortex. Cortex is further divided into four lobes. Now we come to the functions of forebrain. What is the major function of forebrain? As we've already discussed in the previous slides. So, all the functions related to perception, sensation, emotions, intelligence, and memory are conducted in the forebrain. The cortex and cerebrum controls all these sensory, perceptual, and mental cognitive processes. The motor area. The motor area of forebrain controls different bodily parts and nerves during voluntary movements. So, the voluntary movements of our limbs and other organs is being controlled by the motor area of forebrain. If the motor area is disturbed, if the motor area is defected, then there would be paralysis in the voluntary movements. Voluntary, we would not be able to voluntarily move our body parts. Okay, the sensory area. Sensory area is concerned with the sensations, sensations of cold, heat, pressure, touch, pain, and so on. The sensory area of forebrain controls the sensations, and if this area is damaged, we are unable to feel these sensations or to experience these sensations. The nerves get damaged in the area, and there would be no sensation, there would be no response of an individual. The visual area. The visual area of the forebrain is responsible for the vision, and when the light waves strike the sensory receptors of the retina, visual vision is produced. The visual nerves register them and pass them to the visual area, and from there, the message is sent back to the organ to respond. The auditory area. Okay. The vibration registered in both of the ears, is transmitted to auditory area and the process of hearing is completed. So the auditory area is responsible for the hearing. And if this part is damaged, we are unable to hear. Okay. The temporal area of forebrain controls the gustatory and tactile functions. The nerve fibers in the nose and tongue carry message to the temporal lobe, and thus the individual is able to distinguish between different tastes and smells. So temporal area is involved in taste and smell functioning. The next is speech area. Speech area, also known as Broca area. Paul Broca discovered this area. Speech area are related to the frontal and temporal and occipital lobes. Broca was the first to discover this speech area in the frontal lobe. This area moves the tongue and jaws of the jaws. So these were the major areas of forebrain which control perception, sensation, emotions, memory, and intelligence factors of the body. Motor area, sensory area, visual area, which is connected to occipital lobe, the auditory area, which is related to the temporal lobe, temporal area related to the temporal lobe and controlling the taste and smell functioning, speech area related to the frontal, temporal, and occipital lobe. Okay, so next comes thalamus. What is thalamus? Thalamus is an egg like bundle of nerves above the brainstem. It functions as a relay station. It passes on the information sent by the spinal cord, and it passes the visual, auditory, tactile, gustatory, and different other sensations to the cortex. One part of it, one part of thalamus plays an important role in sleep wake cycle also. That is why the thalamus is also considered to be related to the reticular system of the body. We can also say that thalamus has a role in depression and restlessness as well. So, this is the thalamus, which is an egg like bundle of nerves acting as a relay station and passing the visual, auditory, tactile, and other sensations to the cortex. Actually, thalamus is a relay station which passes the information to the cortex part of the mind. It is also involved in sleep wake cycle. It has also a role in depression and different moods of the body as well. Next comes the hypothalamus. Okay, hypothalamus is located below the thalamus. It is it's it is size of a pea. It is very small in size, but it holds much importance. The hypothalamus is crucially involved in emotions and motivation aspect of the body. It controls hunger, thirst, sexual behavior, reproduction, sleep, aggression, and so on. Beside this, beside these things, the hypothalamus also regulates body's temperature. It is also involved in the homeostasis of the body. Whenever homeostasis is disturbed due to any external factor or stress, the hypothalamus helps the organism to restore its functioning back to normal functioning. So, hypothalamus has a function in motivation and emotion. Whenever a body is disturbed, whenever the homeostasis, the balance of the body is disturbed, so hypothalamus helps to normalize the body. For example, both sweating in heat and shivering in cold normalize body temperature. So hypothalamus helps in that. Helps in the body temperature regulation as well. So hypothalamus controls all the systems that help the organism to avoid imbalance. For example, sweating in heat and shivering in cold, everything homeostasis, bringing body back to normal position, controlling hunger, thirst, sexual behaviors, sleep, controlling emotions and motivation, bringing back the body into normal balance is the function of hypothalamus. Hypothalamus has a key role in emotions as well. For example, in case of stress or emergency or any emotional outburst, the hypothalamus mobilizes the organism. The hypothalamus helps the organism for any complex motor action so that the individual is prepared for fight or flight. Okay, so it has a great role in emotions, in bringing body back to normal emotions, preparing the body for fight or flight response, and in motivational aspect of the body, involved in homeostasis, bringing body back to normal condition, normalizing and bringing body's temperature back to normal is the function of hypothalamus. Okay, so dear students, in this lecture today, we learned about the forebrain, which is the first major part of brain. Today, we read about brain, its structure, its major structure, main first part, the forebrain. In the next lecture, we are going to read about the midbrain, hindbrain, and the spinal cord. The other division of the nervous system, spinal cord. Okay, so we are done with forebrain. Hope the topic is clear. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.